Hello Year 9, and this is a lesson on Jane Eyre, lesson 3. And my first slide says, do you know it? Have you heard of Jane Eyre before? Have you heard it's a famous book by Charlotte Bronte? And it's really typically taught in Year 9 or Year 8 across schools throughout England. And so have you read it before or read anything of it? You can read it online, you can access online, or you can order it from Amazon, etc. I really recommend that you read it. Or have you seen it? So there's loads of versions of Jane Eyre out there. It's been done by the BBC, it's been done by it's on film. You can type into YouTube Jane Eyre, you can watch, I think there's about 3 or 4 versions already on YouTube. So I really urge you to watch one of those before we dive into lesson 3. So what we're looking at today is, this is not on your work pack, but if you get your work pack in front of you, this slide isn't on your work pack. However, I put it in it just to start you thinking. So I've got this question, what do you think these 4 buildings all have in common? So have a little look at those 4 buildings. They're quite diverse in the way that they appear, but what do you think that they have in common? Maybe you think they're museums, maybe you think they're businesses, but in actual fact, they are all schools. And schools across the country are extremely different. There's a huge variety in schools. I've taught in a number of different schools now, and I've literally taught from private education through to early years, and in every school that I've taught in it's really, really different, but there are some fundamental things that remain the same. However, what we want you to look at is different school experiences, and we're going to look at later Jane Eyre's experience of school. But first of all, why don't you ask the people you live with, what was their experience of school? What was it like? Is it really different to yours? That'd be really interesting to see, particularly maybe just think about the experience you're having right now of school, like virtual learning online, in contrast to what your day-to-day life was at school before lockdown. But definitely ask people you live with what their experience of school would be like. It'd be really interesting. I bet they have a few funny stories to tell as well. And then we are going to read about Jane Eyre's school called Lowood School. But before we do, just check out these key vocabulary points. So first of all, tumult is like a really loud or chaotic noise. So for example, you might say a tumult of thunder. A collect is a short prayer, so you might hear it in the line, for example, the priest read the short collect. Scripture is the writings of the Bible, so you might hear in church someone say, oh, turn to scripture, and it means like turn to a passage in the Bible. And intonation, which is a really tired due to being lacking of food. So it's been really weary, but because you haven't eaten in so long. So we're going to dive into a passage from Jane Eyre, and it's from chapter 5. You've got some questions to look at in your work pack. You've got some questions that you might want to read now on this extract, whilst I read to you just the first paragraph. So the first paragraph says, the night passed rapidly. I was too tired even to dream, and I only once awoke to hear the wind rave in furious gusts and the rain fall in torrents, and to be sensible that Miss Miller had taken her place by my side. When I again unclosed my eyes, a loud bell was ringing. The girls were up and dressing. Day had not yet begun to dawn, and a rushlight or 2 burned in the room. I too rose reluctantly. It was bitter cold, and I dressed as well as I could for shivering, and washed when there was a basin at liberty, which did not occur soon, as there was but one basin to 6 girls, and a basin is a sink. So basically she's saying there's 1 sink to 6 girls. And on the stands down in the middle of the room, again the bell rang. All formed in file, 2 and 2, and in that order descended the stairs and entered the cold and dimly lit schoolroom. Here prayers were read by Miss Miller, and afterwards she called out, "Form classes!" So this is the beginning of chapter 5, and again, look in your work packs, you've got those questions there on it, and I'm just going to look at one of the questions with you to maybe give you a help there. So the first question you've got in your work pack says, what words show that Jane is unhappy or distressed. Now, I love a good highlighter, so I personally would take out my highlighter and I would start looking through the paragraph to look at words that show that Jane, who's the narrator, is unhappy or that she's distressed. Distress meaning, she's a bit annoyed, she's quite unhappy in herself, she's not at ease, she's not comfortable. So I would look through and I would see these words, first of all, too tired. So I personally, first of all, I would highlight those words, whatever way you want to highlight them, I would highlight those words, too tired. So I've put them in green there because that shows me, first of all, that she's quite distressed, she's quite uncomfortable. And then as I would read through, I only once awoke to hear the wind rave in furious gusts and the rain fall in torrents, and to be sensible that Miss Miller had taken her place by my side. Now, if I was thinking really hard, okay, and I was considering about the way the author was writing this passage, I might actually think about the fact that the wind is quite furious. It's raving in furious gusts. And I might also look about the fact that it's raining in torrents. Now, think carefully. How could they reflect that Jane's unhappy? What's that device called? What's it called, Year 9? When you use the weather to kind of reflect the mood of a character, what's going on in the room. Pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy. And if I was thinking really carefully here, I'd go, this is pathetic fallacy, where you've got the wind furious outside and this rain lashing down, and that reflects this really unhappy, uncomfortable, distressed, distraught mood that our main character's in. Then I'll go through again, and maybe I'd look for maybe a more obvious version. So here it says, I too rose reluctantly. And reluctantly means that you don't really want to do it. Maybe you are having to do this work on Jane Eyre reluctantly because your parents have told you to do it. Or maybe you had to get up this morning reluctantly because your parents said it's time to get up. Or maybe you had to watch something reluctantly because one of your siblings or someone else in your household wanted to watch this and you had to watch it too reluctantly. So that shows that what she's doing things that she doesn't really want to do. So have a look through the rest of the paragraph and see if you can highlight things that show that she's unhappy or distressed. And then have a look at the other two questions there, okay? And what they ask you to do. And again, use your highlighter to maybe highlight versions before you write things down. Then there's another extract that you can go on and you can read, and similarly it's got some questions for you to answer as well. I'm not going to go through that with you because of time's sake. I'm running a bit out of time and I need to trip on, but also I feel quite strongly you should be able to do that, read the extract and have a go at the questions. Then there is something quite interesting for you to watch, and it's on Reformation Schools, and there's what it looks like on YouTube. So if you type into YouTube what was life like at a Victorian reformatory school, it will come up with this link. It's by the BBC, and you get to watch this 7-minute video on these schools in England. And I loved watching this. I love the Victorian era. I love some of their ideas and concepts, and this idea of a reformatory school was to take children who had committed some crimes, maybe just petty crimes like stealing a necklace or pickpocketing, and place them in a school to equip them with certain skills so that they would go out and benefit society. So reform, turning around, changing someone, was the idea behind this. However, maybe they weren't all as what they seemed. So go and have a watch of this and really think, do you think that these schools were a good idea? Do you think we should have them today? Like, do you think actually educating those that are involved in crime is a really good and positive thing? And actually we should have that today rather than sending kids off to juvenile prisons. Would you have liked to have gone into the school described? Would you like to have been there? Why or why not? Personally, for me, I love school. I love routine. I probably wouldn't mind being in a school like that. However, I'm not a fan of the meals that they describe. Not a fan at all. Quite like my variety when it comes to food. So have a watch and see what your thoughts are and your ideas are on Reformatory School, because that is the type of school that Jane Eyre was in. And then based on that, we've got a creative writing piece. And the creative writing is a day in school where something goes wrong. And it might be that if you're like me, I like to have a bit of a plan first. So I've put ideas here. You like my little scream emoji for the fact that something's gone wrong. And before I would start writing, I think it's a really good idea to get some ideas down. So I would probably reflect on my own experience, or I would reflect on something really creative. So from my own experience, actually really recently, we have had lockdown. The fact that I was in school one day and we had to make difficult decisions about whether we would continue to come in or whether we would stay at home for weeks and weeks because of coronavirus. So maybe I would describe that day. And I really remember clearly from that day, Mr. McLean giving a really clear presentation to us at staff and relaying to us what actually school might look like and what's going to happen. So I might put that as one of my points here. I might put Mr. McLean's, oh, sorry sir, so spelling your name completely wrong. Mr. McLean's assembly. There we go. That might be one of the points that I would write about. And then I remember having a good old chinwag to my husband, Mr. Boxall, obviously, about what the implications might mean, about what might happen, about the fact that our son is in school as well and whether he will be allowed to be in school or not. So I might then put discussion with my husband. There we go. And so if I wanted to do that, these then become the paragraphs that I'm going to write about. So I'm going to talk about lockdown. I'm going to talk about the fact my first paragraph I would probably describe Mr. McLean's assembly. My second paragraph will be my discussion with my husband. Third paragraph will probably be like what we did next. So that would be my day in school where something goes wrong. Or if I wanted to be really creative, okay, if I wanted to think what would nobody else write about, I might think really carefully about something really shocking. So maybe, or something extremely exciting. So maybe I remember the day we got stick insects, and those stick insects that we had babies, and over lockdown we have now got about 34 stick insects. It's got a little out of hand, and perhaps I'm going to pretend that I took those stick insects to school and they all escaped. So I maybe would write about the day the stick insects escaped in school. There we go. And again, I would think about what would I write about? Write about the fact that I brought them in, how they escaped, me trying to capture them once again, and those types of things. And I'd put that into a little bit of a plan. So each paragraph, I knew that what I was writing. And then I would try my best to write that using a range of techniques, similes, metaphors, alliteration, pathetic fallacy, like we had in Jane Eyre. I would also make sure that my punctuation, my spelling and my grammar was really, really correct. So that will hopefully support what you're doing in the work pack for lesson 3. Hopefully that's made things a bit clearer. Hopefully it's given you some good ideas as well as what to do. All the best, Year 9, and I hope you have a great time doing lesson 3. Thanks.